Welcome to the Hope After Child Loss podcast, where we endeavor to offer stories of hope to grieving parents and siblings so that they might rediscover life filled with meaning, purpose, and hope. We invite you to come and join us. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Hope After Child Loss. I am your host, Greg Buffkin, as always. Today, guys, I'm going to be talking with my guest, Danielle Duffey. Danielle, we welcome you to the podcast. It's so good to have you today.
Thanks, Greg. I'm really honored to be here today, and shared experiences definitely bring people together and provide an undeniable understanding. Under unfortunate circumstances, but I am so honored and grateful to be here. So thank you for having me.
Well, it's our honor. Let's talk about you a little bit so that people that are listening just get to know you a little before you dive into your story. I believe you shared with me that you live in Minnesota and you are, I think you are working with the Minnesota State University. Tell us a little bit about that role and a little bit about where in Minnesota you're located, because that's, for those of us who live in the South, we always think that's a really cold place this time of the year.
It is actually been a beautiful week here, high of 55 and sunny, so we embrace that. But so my name is Danielle Duffey, and I am from southern Minnesota in a rural family farm community. I'm a mother of 4 kiddos, including our angel son, Blake, which is the premise of our conversation. I'm an Army veteran, and I do work outside the home at our local university here in the alumni relations. I'm very multi-passionate, and so I carry many hats. But most importantly, my family is just something that I take so much pride in.
Before we go any further, I want to stop and say thank you so much for your service.
Yes, thank you. I never imagined joining the military after high school, but my dad, who had passed away actually a few years after I joined, encouraged me to join the military to experience other areas, meet people, and that honestly gave me the profound appreciation for this country and just for hard work. So it really set the foundation toward my path in higher education as well.
Absolutely. What branch did you serve in?
Army Reserve. So I was in for 7 years, and it supported my education. Grew up in a blue collar home, and my parents weren't really able to support me in that way. And so I did kind of figure that out, and it was an amazing experience. And actually my reserve hub was in Mankato next to the university here. So it brought me back to family as well.
Perfect. Yeah. That's, it's the benefits of being a part of the military for as it relates to education is incredible, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I will say my dad was such a impactful role model in my life, and he passed away unexpectedly when I was in college. And that's kind of when my journey in grief had started. I'm now able to share this message that transformed my life.
Yeah. One thing you did not mention that you and I had a previous conversation, and I found it very interesting, especially considering what we're doing today. And that is that you have your own podcast.
I do, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So as a multi-passionate individual and a creative, during COVID, essentially, I was able to kind of filter this energy and create the Mission Mama podcast. So really sharing the message of hope and encouragement to others, and having a platform for other moms, other bereaved moms, or moms with a story, to provide that encouragement to other women that just really crave that connection and know that we aren't alone in this world. I mean, there's always as I said earlier, shared experiences bring people together. And so I found that very therapeutic to be able to share my message, connect with other people. Technology has made it really amazing to be able to connect with someone in some other area that you wouldn't have connected with normally on the street.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just find it amazing because there's this consistent thread as I talk with people who are guests on my podcast. I invariably they share how they also want to engage with other people who have lost a child to help them find hope and meaning and purpose again in the aftermath of that. And it's so refreshing. And it's one of the things I absolutely love about doing this podcast because I get to meet some of the most incredible people, and you being one of them.
Yes. Yep. And I'm definitely going to go into more detail. I mentioned that my dad passed away, and I didn't really know how to grieve. Grieving is different, fast forward to now, but essentially when years and years later into our marriage, our son Blake, who was 17 months old, passed away in his sleep from sudden unexplained death of a child. And we all know about SIDS, but SUDC specifically is for children above the age of 1 year old. And that completely cracked me wide open. The grief that we had experienced earlier in life, and other losses in our family almost compounded the grief when our son passed. And it's just such a traumatic, unfathomable experience. It's out of order, right? You never even consider in your mind that you will lose a child. And now we've been able to live through loss, working through that joy and sorrow every single day, but been able to experience joy again.
Yeah, and I think it's hard for people who are in the early stages of grief to be able to comprehend that because the pain is so great in that early stage. It may be days, weeks, months, all of the above for most of us. But that's one of the things that I hope to offer through the conversations that we have on this podcast is a balance of people understanding what connecting with the hearts of other people who are grieving to know what the process is like so that they know what to expect along the way if they're in the early stages, but so that they also understand that there is hope for your future and there is indeed a future for you. And along that grief journey, yeah, you can experience joy and hope, and you can find fulfillment and purpose again in your life. So thank you for offering that.
I often reflect back at those early years of grief, and I just read a quote, and it's a child doesn't come, your grief doesn't come to an end. It's honestly an indescribable journey of survival. And those first few years, it was like holding my breath because you're in survival. You're craving that. I don't want to say normalcy because there isn't, but you're craving for a breath of fresh air. You're just, there's no one way to grieve, and it's such an uncomfortable topic that it's so hard and just excruciating.
Yeah.
And I think, at least for my experience growing up, our family didn't provide the space to feel emotions, and so that made it really hard and acceptable in our environment. And so I think I was craving that community of others maybe that had experienced loss. And I eventually did. And I was amazed that these women were sitting right in front of me. I wasn't able to see myself in their eyes, but I was able to know that I wasn't alone. And I just wanted more of that connection with others. It took a lot longer because of the experience and environment I had been in, but eventually I broke through that. And I'm so passionate about allowing that grief to surface. Like it's normal. It's okay to feel what you feel.
Yeah, exactly. And as you alluded to a moment ago, there is no one way to grieve. There's no right or wrong way. As counselors shared with us, there's certainly healthy versus unhealthy ways to grieve, but not right or wrong.
Right.
And I'm glad that you were able to connect with some other people, because I don't know about you, but nobody ever gave me a handbook on grieving. I don't know that it matters what our background was so much. Sometimes I came from a rather stoic family. I don't think whatever your background is, I don't think you can ever be prepared to lose a child.
You're never prepared, honestly, whether it be, if a child, in our experience, there's no closure. We've
Right,
done genetic testing. They flew in the best of the best doctor in the country to Rochester, which has the best medical care in the state, and there nothing came up. It was unknown. And that's what made it really hard, because I felt like I was searching for answers and searching for closure, thinking that it would have made it feel better. And it does not. And I will never say that another child loss is worse than another. This was
right.
our experience. And again, hearing other people's experience made it like slightly comforting. Or just provided that hope that I think I needed.
Right.
I didn't grow up in maybe a faith first household either, and so it definitely challenged our faith tremendously, and there's so much to unpack there, but
Yeah.
we we were able to, I will say, and I want to recommend this to anyone, is we stayed. It's called Faith's Lodge in northern Wisconsin, and it's a retreat center. It's a safe space where families can stay for the weekend and meet other families that have experienced child loss. And it provided the most comfort in that moment that it could be possible. And they provide some therapy sessions, a massage. You can bring your children, and that's what we did. And we were together from the outside world, and it made it, that much a little bit easier to cope.
Yeah. So Danielle, how far along were you guys when you went?
So we lost Blake on Labor Day weekend in 2016, and we stayed there the following March for his birthday.
Hmm.
And so it was hard to get the courage to go, but ended up being a really nice weekend. And then we went again a year later, and had a nice weekend together, but it was also a very different experience. And so I do encourage families to go there if they want. It's a safe space, and
Yeah.
you feel you're in community. We've met some lifelong friends and just have that compassionate understanding for each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can be yourself.
Yeah. I wish more people had the ability to do things like that. We don't have anything that I'm aware of in our part of the world. But that's not the first time I've heard of one up in your area of the country. I had a guest on a couple of months ago, and they actually, he and his wife have become directors of a retreat center similar to that in Minnesota.
We do have quite a few. And actually, you mentioned that on our call last week, and I did look that retreat center up and hope to go at some point.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Let's circle back to to something. We were talking earlier, about your son Blake, and I think more people are familiar with SIDS, as you said. But I have to be honest in saying, until we had a conversation, I was not familiar with. I don't know how people refer to it, but SUDC. I know it's the sudden unexpected death in childhood, and so I Googled it and discovered that it's actually pretty rare. Only about what I read was about 1.4 deaths out of every 100,000 toddler-age children. So that is pretty rare. I don't know if this is something that, and what I read was that there's no known ability to affect it at this point because they don't know enough about it. Is that fairly accurate?
It is, and we were unfamiliar until essentially it came to us. Someone mentioned our story, and the SUDC Foundation supports family. They raise awareness, fund private research for SUDC because, yes, it remains unexplained after a thorough case of investigation. It's so hard to comprehend, but we are in a community of hundreds of families over the years. There are hundreds of people in this community. Every day there's questions. How do we make it through? Every day there's an introduction of this family had lost their child. And it's so heartbreaking. Their tagline is love beyond reason. And it's been just the most supportive foundation that are located in New Jersey, and they have a family retreat every year. They provide so much for our family that has experienced SUDC. But the awareness is what matters. And so I'm on a mission as an ambassador to share with others in various ways that this does exist. And it's children from the age of 1 to 18, believe it or not. It's unbelievable. And our family's in a research study because one day they may be able to find answers, but right now there aren't answers.
Man, that's such good work, Danielle. Keep up the good work. I'm glad to know that there's an organization like that, and I'm glad to see and hear what you're doing as far as you can do from somebody who's experienced it firsthand. And I'm so sorry that you guys went through that. Let's circle back to earlier in the conversation. We talked about how difficult losing a child is. I think people identify in some way, shape, or form with grief. Everybody has lost someone in their life, or if you have it, you will. And grief is just hard work. But I think what people don't understand is the added impact, the trauma of such an unspeakable loss. Because I don't know that there's really a word in the English language that captures the impact that losing a child has on a parent. From your perspective, I mean, you've been on a journey almost as long as ours, 7 years. How would you say that grief has changed your life, or how has it impacted your life, Danielle, that you would share with others?
That's a big question. It's so many ways.
I know.
So when you talk about the early days of grief, and the support that we've received has been remarkable. We live in a small community where everyone knows each other, and I definitely can appreciate that because we had so many show up without being asked. And that's the biggest thing, just having people to show up, offer those meals, offer to take care of other children, offer to provide those practical things that you literally cannot make a decision. You cannot think straight. And it's a very just incomprehensible experience. But over time, I mean, it's remarkable. I think back those days. We moved down the street. So we not only moved, we had two more children after loss. And that's a hard thing too. I mean, to decide to have more children, just the whirlwind of emotions going through. I honestly, I don't even recognize myself. It's kind of wild to think about that. But grief has, I will say, enriched our life in more ways than I ever could have imagined. That's the gratitude that I feel every waking day it's like tear-filled gratitude. I cannot even describe it in another way, but I'm very blessed to be here. So from my perspective, of course, my husband has his own experience, but from a mother's perspective, I've worked really hard to carve out that joy and be present in the pain.
Yeah.
Because it comes back to surface. But that joy in the everyday, the gratitude that I practice every single day, I've never experienced such gratitude. That's been the premise of everything the mission in our lives. But it has completely changed me in so many ways. I can't even put it into words. It's really hard to articulate, but
that's fair.
It's transformed our life in many ways.
Yeah. Danielle, talk a little bit about how you arrived at that place on your grief journey where the pain began to, or in that pain, you began to experience joy and gratitude again. I suspect that your faith in God played a role in that, because you referred a few minutes ago to the fact that faith played a big role in where you are now, and that you didn't really start out with a faith foundation. So can we kind of talk about that? Because I think people are looking for something that they can grab onto, but sometimes grief just really hits us so hard, even if we are very committed believers in Jesus. And sometimes it's hard. You have to borrow faith from other people sometimes, I think.
Yes, that's completely true. So I remember so many experiences trying to find, whether it be a grief group or just seeking to be fixed. And I think it was 4 years ago where I just had to surrender and just, there's power in the prayer. I think I just surrendered one day because I just could not suffer in silence any longer. So it goes back to not feeling heard in my grief, not being able to have that safe space to share how I feel, to let others around me know that I cried all day long for 1 year, and not being able to share that helped me understand that's not a healthy way to grieve. Of course, there's just so much, there's no other love profound than for your child, but I didn't have a way of filtering out this grief. And so I started to journal, and it was really hard to start that practice. Pen to paper, I just kept showing up day after day after day. And one of the first journals that I bought was the 5-minute journal, and it's pretty well known. And it was write down your gratitudes and then dreams that you would hope to have accomplished one day, or just hopes, the joys. Just, I would show up in the morning, tears, no matter what, I would show up. And so I would write down to experience joy, to smile. Just, I needed that joy. I need a community. And so I wrote this down for days, months, and years. And one day I went to our local church, and they had a preschool event, and they offered the opportunity to join a small group study. And I had a misconception about a Bible study, but these women opened their arms to me. And through this journaling process, I have this in my closet that I wrote for almost a year, that I wanted a community of like-minded women that would understand. And I know for a fact that God placed them in my heart. They are in my life by divine design. I mean, that's God right there. And so we still do this small group study, and I show up every week, and just with this profound gratitude, because they were so accepting and loving, and they heard me, they saw me for who I was, and that opened up the door to healing that I never felt any other way.
Yeah, something you said a few minutes ago about suffering in silence. Yeah, that's something that we don't want anybody to feel like they have to do, because that can be a very dark place, right? Sometimes, and I think this is what I heard you saying but not saying, you had to make some conscious decisions to do something that was healthy, or to help you at least start on a path to a healthier place. And it meant that you bought a journal, or somebody gave you a journal, and you got up and you spent some time in that journal. You spent some time in the presence of the Lord, and just started giving those emotions to Him. Is that fairly accurate?
It is. I had to get still. So
Yeah.
between all the busyness in life and parenting, secondary grief is another topic of discussion, but there's not a lot of time to be still. And the hustle mentality that our world is in right now, it's really hard to do. And I was really committed, and I surrendered. I needed to do that. It didn't come out without all the emotions on the spectrum. I had to start. I think one of the biggest realizations was I had to start loving myself again into this new normal, and accept without shame and without guilt that I wasn't allowing myself to grieve. And another separation is, there's grieving, but there's also mourning. And I will say that I wasn't allowing myself to mourn. So
talk a little bit about that for somebody who's listening right now that might not quite understand what you're getting at.
I think just being able to move through the spectrum of emotions in mourning, and just accepting and understanding that they ebb and flow, just allowing myself, it's okay not to be okay. And that was the permission I needed. One of my family members, who I call an angel, one day, we got together, and she just gave me the biggest hug, and the tears poured down my cheek. That's all I needed. I just needed a hug.
Yeah.
And the permission to be seen and heard. And after being more involved in the church, there was the acceptance that everyone experiences grief, but it is your own unique personal journey. And it's okay. It's okay to feel those emotions.
It is. You have to. None of us likes pain, and none of us likes to do hard things. I think our culture almost gives gives people the false hope that if you do this, or if you do that, or if you take this pill, maybe you can escape the pain. But most of the time, all that happens is you're just delaying it. And so, to your point, Danielle, everybody's grief journey is different, and those stages of grief come at different times, but you just have to walk through it. But don't walk through it alone.
Right. That's a great message. And I often go to this quote: by Jamie Anderson. So grief, I've learned, is just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and in that hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go.
You know, Danielle, I love that. Somebody shared that with us a few years ago after we lost Ryan, our son. And man, I'll tell you, that was one of those that you just grab and you want to keep it and not ever forget it, because it feels so true and accurate.
It's profound. I have the goosebumps.
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. You know, Danielle, there's so many things that we can talk about from your own experiences and from the experiences of others that we both draw from. I want to ask you something that I think this is probably very personal. And I realized that Blake was only 17 months old. What would you want people to remember about Blake?
Oh, thanks for asking. Blake, he had beautiful bright blue eyes and blonde hair, curly hair, actually. And we live on our farm, and he was all boy. He loved tractors and trucks and working in the shop with his dad. And we loved camping together. And his sister they were two peas in the pod, and they were very close in age. He was, honestly, looking back, he was the old soul. Like, he would take care of Emily. He would just be so cuddly and loving and honest, and just has left this long legacy in his short life.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like he had quite an impact at only 17 months of age. But you know what I love is that because of what you're doing, Danielle, he continues to touch people's lives 7 years later, and will continue to, because of his mama. I love that. Absolutely love that. You know, before you guys had children, you know, we think we have pretty full lives, you know, when it's just us as couples, or, you know, we have great careers or whatever it might be. But, you know, when a child comes into our life, you know, we have these preconceived notions of all that would entail. Children have a tremendous impact on our lives. You know, we've talked about the impact that losing a child has. What kind of an impact did having Blake in your life have on your life? I know that you can't speak for your husband exactly, but how did he impact you?
Oh gosh. When you have children, your heart explodes. There's no greater love than for your child. And him leaving in after a short life, honestly, I mean, the love continues on. It is unbelievable that the love is growing. And even with more children after loss, it's been extremely hard, but the love has grown. I mean, it's just this profound love. It's hard to even articulate.
It is. You're right.
But definitely the legacy goes on. And your heart just grows bigger in size. And I think about who I was before loss and now after loss. That's kind of how I talk about it. I'm a much more compassionate connector with other people, and my empathy has grown. No matter what someone is going through, I can absorb. I truly, like, full body absorb their grief or their struggle, and I just want to sit with them and listen. And that's supporting my former self, right? So through the journaling process, this journal that I put out on Amazon, I wasn't ready to put that out there last year because I was still becoming who I am meant to be. And now I'm able to speak this truth and share with the world because I'm supporting who I once was.
Right.
And that is just gives me so much compassion and love and purpose and mission in this life.
Yeah, that's why God has you strategically positioned to do what you're doing right now, because you have allowed him to take something that was so traumatic and unspeakable and horrible and turn it for good, to make you more compassionate, to bring you to a place where you could, as you said, you absorb that from other people and can offer them something that the old Danielle couldn't have offered. Yeah.
And this morning, daylight savings has really taken a toll on our family, but we've been waking up a lot earlier. But honestly, my most honest self is at about 5 a.m. in the morning. And that's when I sit in the prayer and I praise God and I sit in that pause. And it's been very fulfilling for me and setting that intention and the joy, but it doesn't come without being present in the pain, joy in the moment, and then it provides hope for the future, because there's always been this unforeseen hope, but our family now has such a strong faith foundation, because we're a true testament to the the blessings in our life after loss. And we're here today because we surrendered, we lean in to the love within and around us, and that's a testimonial to other people.
Absolutely. And as we touched on a few minutes ago, I think there are people that are listening today that, they're in earlier stages of grief, and they're probably listening because they're trying to find a source of hope and encouragement, to know that there's got to be something better on this journey than where I am right now. And so to hear your testimony of what God's done over the past 7 years, I think people will walk away today, whenever they're hearing this, and be encouraged and know that there is hope for the future, and they can find meaning and purpose in their life again, and even experience joy that just seems so elusive in those early days and weeks and months.
Yeah, we all, in the face of this unimaginable loss, there's undeniable strength, though, that emerges through these shared experiences, and the gratitude that can become the premise of your everyday life, even in the midst of struggle. Just clinging out of that hope can compound and eventually turn into that gratitude. But
that is so very true. Talk a little bit more about the journal that you have written, because you talked about the role that it played when you started journaling, that it played on there's a healing journey that runs parallel to our grief journey, and they're pretty much intertwined. I think you would agree. You can't really separate the two. Hopefully you're on a healing journey as you're on that grief journey. If not, please get in touch with a counselor. If you feel like you need to talk with someone, find somebody that you can trust, that you can share this with. And if you feel like maybe you're exhibiting signs of feeling like you're dealing with clinical depression, please see a physician about that, because that can be a dark place. And when you combine depression sometimes is precipitated by grief, and you need to get the help that's necessary to take care of that physical aspect, so that you can deal with the emotional part of it as well in a healthier way.
No, that is true. The stigma around counseling, I think, provides some fear for others, but it is okay. And they can help. Even I was thinking about secondary grief, and my daughter, I wasn't able to provide what she needed in her grief. And so we do some play therapy for her.
Yeah.
And she has developed a strong bond with her, and she's had a lot of delayed grief. And so we talk when we can and share that special bond. But again, having a counselor who can provide the tools to help her move forward, even later in life when there's going to be struggle, is very helpful for her.
Yeah, absolutely. Children, siblings need it too sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But relating to the journal,
Right.
Blake's memory lives on through these pages, and it took me a couple of years to finalize this, but I needed to figure out a way to support my older self. But it's a tribute to his spirit, and it's a labor of love. So through the journals, there's some guided prompts, there's quotes, allowing this space to develop that gratitude, support your own needs, and provide some hope for the future, and really get clear on what it is that you need and what's holding, what's in your heart, just allowing the pages to flow free.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are listening today, I think one of the things that we both could encourage them in is to find a way to take some of that, to move some of that grief from your heart and your consciousness, and either put it on paper or share it with someone. But don't leave it just sitting there, by itself, unprocessed. I think you would agree with that, Danielle.
I would. Whether it be through speaking, talk therapy, or written word, but it is something that definitely connects the different part of your brain on paper. And it just provides that clarity that we may not otherwise kind of realize. And it's super therapeutic. It's just been transformative to me. Questions, journal prompts, I should say, is a good way to start versus maybe an open page format. But just allowing yourself to breathe again.
Yeah, giving yourself permission to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and that's another reason too that we both, I think, we both do podcasts, is so that we can offer a platform to parents like us who are grieving to have a safe place to share their story. Because as we share our story, it's not only therapeutic and healing in the one who's sharing, but also for somebody who's listening.
Absolutely. Yes, it's definitely a safe space where others can relate and appreciate and understand.
Yeah. I want you to tell our listeners one more time how they can, if they would like to, obtain the journal that you've written, Danielle. And
yes,
and I will have this in your podcast description as well. We'll share a link. But if somebody's listening right now and they have the ability to write it down if they want to, tell them again how they can get it.
Sure. I would honestly, genuinely love to connect with anyone. So I am very active on Instagram at Danielle Duffey with an EYY, or my journal is on Amazon if you type in my name. But the journal is called Gratitude Through Grief, a 90-day journey. And so you can type those words or type in my name, Danielle Duffey.
Great. Well, I think a lot of people, if they will get that, I think they'll find a lot of encouragement and hope through what you have shared. And Danielle, I just want to say thank you once again for carving time out of your schedule to be our guest today and to share with our listeners more about you and the journey that you've been on, and to share with us, to entrust to us the story of your son Blake.
Yes, I feel honored and appreciate, and I just want the listeners to know that I'm truly holding them in my heart today.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thanks, Fred.
If you find our podcast meaningful, we invite you to follow us so that you can automatically receive the latest episodes. Also, we'd like to invite you to contact us and talk with us about sharing your story on a future episode, because every story is important and matters to God. Please reach out via email at hope@emptychairendeavor.com. That's hope@emptychairendeavor.com. And as always, thank you so much for listening.